Testing, testing. Hello, hello. Are we alive? Is there video and audio? And also other audio? Testing, testing. Smiley face confirmed. Voice heard. Okay. So there's a lag, I suppose, and that's okay. That is the way of things. Uh, so welcome to the Teachstream. This is like the third or fourth one we've done. Uh, there are a few things I was asked to cover, and we're going to be talking about perspective first. We're going to talk a little bit about expressions, uh, like facial expressions and how those work. And we're going to talk about coloring and shading. And I'm not sure exactly how long that'll take, but that's the plan to start out with. And if at any point you have a question about what I'm saying or think I might be explaining something oddly, uh, by all means feel free to, jump in and let me know what you'd like. Uh, but first, we're going to start out talking about perspective, and I'm going to start talking about it in a general sense, and then move on to the, fun stuff, I guess. But perspective, in just an art sense, is a way of giving things depth. So if I draw a box here, congratulations, we have a two-dimensional square. Uh, but if I wanted to make it look like the square was actually somewhere in three-dimensional space, I'd want to kind of draw lines indicating that. And that looks kind of alright. Uh, but to make sure that your shapes have the correct amount of depth, uh, it helps a lot to have an actual perspective ruler. And not every drawing program you come across is going to have one of these built in. Psi definitely doesn't. Psi is what I use to work with. So I have an extra program I've downloaded called Carapace, which I am linking in the chat right now. Carapace was made by somebody on the team that made the Gears of War games, and it's a cool little program that helps you either just make little perspective rulers like this. It also generates grids for you to use, which is great to so that your boxes don't look all wavy and gross like this one does. Although, you can cheat like that, I guess, if you're a nerd. Uh, but Carapace is a really, really nice little tool, and until there's a program that I like that has all these things built into it, Carapace is a nice little thing that I use all the time. The instructions are pretty simple. It's all just inside the program itself, so I won't be going over how to use the program. But just know that if you, like, Meister Lee says he has Clip Studio and that these kind of things are built in. So if you are running a program with these kind of features built in, you don't need Carapace. But I do. Because it's very, very nice. But, so talking about perspective in a general sense, like I said, it's a way of giving things depth. And to achieve the proper look of a perspective thing, this is why we use the perspective ruler. Because this point in the middle would be called the horizon line, and that's where the horizon would be. Or no, it's called the vanishing point, I'm sorry. The line I'm drawing right now is the horizon line. The vanishing point is the spot in the distance to which all points kind of aim in on. And when you are outside looking at things, you'll kind of notice vanishing points and horizon lines and stuff on your own. But when you're drawing a picture, you kind of have to do all that yourself. Uh, so any point, like if I was to draw like a log here or a log here or something, we've got circles here, but if we were going to give them any depth, they would all kind of go in towards the horizon line. And you can see that I'm using, whoops, you can see that I'm using the kind of ruler that I have to make sure my lines are pretty close to appropriate. One thing you can do if you're not quite sure how much depth to give something, one thing you could do is just draw a shape here, draw a smaller shape closer to the vanishing point, and then connect them with lines. So now we've basically just got a whole bunch of cylinders here. But keep in mind, like, in an actual shape, you wouldn't see all of the back circle, so you would end up erasing part of that, like you would with all of these, really. And these are definitely not perfect. These were kind of just quickly done. But basically, I had another couple ones to show you kind of more examples. I don't think we even need that one, though. Let's get rid of it. This one I had here was to kind of give you a basic, or a kind of a basic horizon line, because when you're outside and looking at stuff in the real world, the horizon line is kind of low, unless there's something in the way in front of you. But, so if I wanted to draw a building, for instance, it would look very much like this. The top of it would would look like this because I'm using these vanishing lines. And the bottom of the building would be below the horizon line. And then, like, that would be the basic shape of the building. So if you're planning out city scenes, basically it boils down to drawing a lot of blocks in the correct formation and using the correct perspective to make them convincing. And that is still definitely not something I'm great at. This is one point perspective, and it's useful in some situations, but doing something more interesting is something I can't really do myself very well yet. But right now, if we turn off the ruler we've got, kind of looks like we're looking down a street. Technically, these would want to get bigger, but that's okay. Then there might be buildings we're looking directly at. But you can see like this, it's kind of like the barest pieces of a scene, like that. Meisterly says that a low horizon line can make characters appear big in relation to you, and a high one can make them seem small. And I think that's probably more in how you use the horizon lines, because right now, if I wanted to, I could, let's see, I can use this to just draw characters about anywhere. These are not very great by any means. And like, it all kind of depends on where they are in relation to the horizon line that helps you figure out their size. I had this one up here. Oh yeah, this one I have a horizon line set up really high to kind of show you what things look like uh, when you're looking upwards. So going again to this other thing, if we wanted to do a city scene, if we were looking straight up, we would see the tops of buildings. Whoops. So the buildings would be going something like this. Whoops. And to make things easier on myself, I'm drawing my buildings using the exact lines on the ruler. When you're drawing an actual picture, sometimes you won't get lucky and have your things fall exactly on the ruler, so you'll have to kind of think to yourself, like, what's halfway in between the 2 points on this ruler, and just try and do it like that. So let's get rid of those. The other thing I wanted... I'm sorry, I probably should have had these things written down a little bit better. I am a little bit scatterbrained today. I was going to talk about characters and perspective, stuff that we're not just talking about blocks, but let's talk about what a character would look like with some interesting perspectives. So first of all, let's just draw a character straight on. Whoops, one moment. So like when you're drawing a character, you've got shapes that they're made out of. And when looking at them straight on, it kind of makes sense what shapes connect where and stuff. But if you are going to draw something at a perspective, you have to figure out. Actually, let's do it like this so you can actually see them side by side. Oops. There we go. And that is not a very great character, but it's something. But when you're doing something like this, you have to realize how the shapes of the body connect together and kind of plan them out accordingly. So with this horizon line, like I said with the city thing, it's like we're looking up. So if we wanted to draw a larger character that we're looking up at, we'd have the head shape here. Somewhere close, whoops, let's make that a little bit better. Somewhere close to the bottom, we'd have the neck shape. maybe not quite that long. From that we get the torso shape. And you can see we're kind of just translating these shapes over here, which I did not do a very good job planning them out, my bad. But we're just trying to make them into something where we're seeing basically the bottom of each of these shapes. Because right here we're just looking straight through it, but if we were looking up, we'd basically be seeing the bottom of all these shapes. So that's what we're trying to do when we're planning this out. And also notice how the farther down we get, kind of the bigger things look in appearance, because they're getting closer to us, and the closer something is to your eyes, the larger it looks. That's kind of how perspective works. Kind of the same thing about when it comes to distances. Oops. How do we zoom out a little bit? Like basically we've got the top of the leg measures this much, and the bottom of the leg, whoops, measures this much, and in correct proportions, a leg of the top part of the leg and bottom part are about the same length, or should be. Proportions always vary, kind of, but because of the perspective we're going for, the bottom part is closer to us, so it looks longer than the top part does. Which is going to be the same with the arms. Whoops. The arms are going to look really thin and really short compared to the legs because they're just so far away from the eyes. And one of the harder parts of doing a perspective like this, for me at least, is drawing the bottom part of the chin and jaw that connect to the neck. I have yet to be able to make proper sense of it in a way that actually looks good. So I guess we'd have something kind of like this. Except the ears are probably way wrong. I don't know. Basically, this is what perspective is. It boils down to trying to think about things in a three-dimensional sense and piece the shapes together in a way that makes sense. And basically that should be figure drawing in general. You can always just kind of, memorize what a body looks like and just go, whoops. Like some speed drawings I've seen are just like nothing but the final shapes laid down because the person just, has memorized things to the point where they don't need to do construction and stuff underneath. But I find with me, like, that works all right, I guess, for the stuff that I've more or less memorized and poses and stuff that I've kind of memorized. But when I want to actually find out how, like, a new pose works or something, there we go. I can't just, start laying lines down and say, heck yeah, look at this. This is a very, very bad, I don't know. Like, it looks alright, but the not perspective, the proportions are kind of garbage, and I don't know. Like, if I want to draw this same guy sitting down, I'd have to go, okay, so, like, you know, here's the hitbox, and here's legs. I'd have to put a lot more thought into the shapes and stuff because I don't know what I'm doing at all with, oops, with this pose. And even then, I'm not getting things quite right. I'd still have to do some tweaking and, more figuring out. And that's not very good perspective or proportions at all. But that would, like, wow, yeah, that is kind of gross. So yeah, it kind of looks like a person sitting down, but then there's a lot of extra stuff I'd have to do to get it to anything that looks nice. See, and if it looks any good for, a drawing without reference, that's only because I've I've been trying to learn the shapes of a body and how to fit them together, and I kind of have I have a much better understanding of it now than I did even like a couple months ago. Uh, it's just something I've been doing my best to learn so that I can draw things that I couldn't before. Like if I want to draw a character running would be the same thing. I'm not very good at action poses by any means, and this is probably not good proportions and stuff again. But see, we've got hip box. Let's bend that knee a little bit. It'll be something like that. And proportions are all borked up again, but you know, I kind of know from having seen people run kind of what the shape should be doing, like the basic layout of where they would be. Yeah, there we go. And of course, if I needed to draw somebody running, I probably wouldn't just do it like this. I would probably want to find a reference to help me plan where the shapes and stuff would be. So in fact, why don't we just do that real quick? I didn't have one prepared because I didn't think about it until just now, but let's see how this lady compares to the one I just drew. Yeah, like you can see between these two, there's a couple differences that make this pose look better than this one. So let's just go for it. Why not? And this is definitely not going to match up completely to the person I'm drawing by any means. Whoops. And again, I'm just kind of taking the pose I see here, translating it into rough shapes. And if you're having troubles with this, one thing you could always do, like if for some reason with my own drawing, I just could not understand, how these shapes went together, and that happens a lot. uh, but what I'd do is I'd take the picture, kind of reduce the opacity some, make a layer on top of it, and just trace over it. And this is never something I would publish or anything, but see, I think I already don't quite understand what's going on here. I know the shoulder is raised a lot. And these shapes I'm using are just shapes I know from practice. You can see that they're not exactly matching up to the way she looks in real life, but they're just the way I've learned to draw basic body shapes. And if the shapes you learn are slightly different, have different curves or whatever, then that's fine. That's not usually a big deal. And in fact, learning how to put different shapes together can really help you out later, because people don't always look the same at all. And, you know, if you're drawing a big, heavy set person, the shapes that make them up are going to be different from somebody who's just tall and thin. But here we have my traced runner. Let's zoom out on that a little bit and compare this one to the one I did, whoops, just by looking at it. Oh, come on now. And you'll see they're a little bit different. The one that I traced, there's definitely a lot less, oh, come on. Show me side by side. Thank you. There's a lot less neck in the one I traced, and that's because this arm right here covers up all the neck. And this one, I didn't quite understand that, and I put the entire neck shape, and then I started on the torso, and the arms didn't quite have the same position to them. So that's something I'm learning right now about a running pose like this is that, sometimes the neck is going to be covered up by the shoulders as the arms move. Definitely not in every pose because, while you're running, your arms are moving a lot. But that's just something to think about next time I decide to do a running pose. Man, that looks a little bit awkward. Probably because of that, maybe. What did I do? Yeah, okay. Something like that. So we got off a little bit. We're not really talking about perspective anymore, are we? But we are talking about body shapes, and body shapes kind of tied into what we were talking about earlier. Hmm. I don't know. I'm just looking at the difference between these two and trying to see what's weird. The midsection in this one does not look very good. I didn't make the torso or the midsection very thick, so the figure looks really bad. But these are all things that, I'm learning as I'm going. I definitely don't have all the answers right now. Definitely not when it comes to human stuff. Humans are tricky. But that's what makes them fun to me, I guess. There's a lot of variation and stuff you can do. Like here, let's go back to this one. I was talking earlier about like a heavier set person. The shapes that make them up would probably be a lot wider and thicker. Like wow. The legs and arms are going to be a lot shorter. This is not terribly good. Hmm. Let's shrink this down a little bit. That's a little bit cheating. Compared to a character who's just very tall, apparently. You can see I'm using the same basic shapes for both of these. I've got torso, I've got midsection, but the basic shapes between them are shaped very differently, which gives them both a very different feel. It makes them both look like very different people. Oops. This person is floating. Let's let them stop. What am I doing wrong here? Yeah, that's always something fun you can do to make characters look different. Is just use different shapes for them. And that's something I'm trying to do more often in my own character design and stuff. Make characters look different beyond just giving them a different face and different hairstyle and different species sometimes, because I'm making a lot of furries. And I guess that's an easy way to differentiate your characters, because dogs and lizards look a lot different. But if they all look the same, if they all have the same kind of silhouette, well, yeah, that's pretty close. Uh, but if they all have the same silhouette, they're all going to look kind of boring, and nobody's going to be able to. Well, people might be able to tell them apart, but they're just boring and uninteresting to me. That's just kind of part of it, I guess. That's one of my favorite parts about character design, is kind of trying to make people look different. So I guess that's perspective. We talked a lot about perspective, didn't we? Uh, One of the other things somebody wanted to talk about was expressions. And so, let me link the thing in the chat. This is an image that a lot of artists have probably seen at some point in their career. But this is just an expressions chart. And, excuse me, wow. It's to help you kind of learn the differences between a whole bunch of expressions. There's 25 of them on this page, and some of them are kind of, I guess they're pretty similar. Like, I don't know, or they can look pretty similar on the face. But for me, I guess the key to getting expressions right is mostly in kind of the mouth and the eyebrows. Like, whoops, let's zoom in a little bit. Wow. Let's do this real quick to kind of prove a point. It's kind of lazy and I don't know, but here it is. It's like a happy character, would have a happy looking mouth and maybe eyebrows that just kind of are kind of high up on the face. A sad character would have kind of upwardly arched eyebrows and a frown. A pleased character might have a bit different. Wow, that's a little bit much. I don't know. I guess there's a lot of different ways you could interpret pleased. But kind of the basics of expressions on the face are mostly down to the mouth and the eyebrows. So if all you're doing is practicing heads and trying to do the expressions on the heads, those are the two biggest parts you'd want to look at. Expressions also kind of come down to body language, and that's not really something you're going to be able to do much on this. Well, maybe, I don't know. But like, let's see, an irritated character, to me, is to be somebody who, whoops. He just kind of looks mad. He's just kind of fists clenched low, stiff shoulders. It's a very cartoonish, irritated pose. But it's kind of one of the things I would. It was the first thing I thought of. You could even do this and have it look like he's tapping his foot impatiently. or the WTF thing. Where it looks like they're just kind of recoiling from whatever this is. Like, I don't know, it's a cat. This is not part of an important part of the pose. But it looks like, he's angling very much away from whatever it is he's looking at. Like he really wants to get away from it. So if you're trying to figure out expressions, this is, most what I'd recommend trying is figuring out the body language of an expression more than just the facial expression, because the facial expression is important. Like if I was doing the WTF thing and his face was like really happy, that would make no sense. It undermines the rest of the pose. So facial expression is definitely important, very important when it comes to expression, but I'd say body language is also important, is kind of the meat of the expression. If you're trying to figure out these things on your own, what I'd personally recommend is finding some way to have a mirror close to you, like even just a little hand mirror or something, and uh, making the expressions in the mirror so you can actually see what the expressions look like on your own. And like even if we're talking about non-human characters, like if we're doing ponies, a happy expression for a pony, like you can take the same things you've learned for a human and apply it to the pony also. And one cool thing is that ponies and like other non-human characters have going for them is the ears. Like for the sad, you've got the mouth, you've got the eyebrows, but then you can have the little ears coming down off the face to make it look like he's even more sad. The ears can be very expressive too, and that's one of the fun thing about animal characters. Ears and tails tend to be a good emotional indicator too. Like, kind of drooping down when they're sad, or even the tail tucked between their legs if they're sad or embarrassed or something like that. Like, happy wagging tails when they're happy or excited or something like that. These are all cool things you can do with animal characters that you can't really do with human characters. So if that's the route you want to go, I think that's something you should take advantage of. Uh, the other thing, the other big thing somebody wanted me to cover was coloring, and I have something prepared for that I will get to in just a moment. Okay. So, I picked out an old picture I'd already drawn that already had the lines on it. I technically have this already colored, but here, actually, we're going to move this to its own thing. Wow, how did that happen? Uh, oh, because I was on the wrong layer. There we go. So basically right now we've got nothing but the lines. And yeah, this is a giant mare getting a massage. Uh, it's a picture I really liked, and it's one of the few pictures I could find easily that had nice clean lines and wasn't just kind of, I don't know, either too complicated or too simple. This has the whole figure in it. It has 3 figures in it, and it's going to do well for, let's get rid of that. It's going to do well enough for what I needed. Excuse me. So for this, actually, we're going to start off by cheating because it's in the spirit of things. I have an image in my guides folder. I have a bunch of little images that help out with things, excuse me, which I suggest you build up a folder of stuff like this also. Uh, like here's an image of what ponies look like from the top. So you can see, well, whoops, where did my pen go? I'm getting off topic again, but that's okay. I like getting off topic. But not only can you see like head and 2 body circles and then like what their legs look like below them, you can also see how their hair actually works from the top. Not so much rarities because she's looking up at us, but it's kind of nice to be able to see characters from a different angle than we normally do, because it helps you figure out how things work better. I also had a couple of these with just, actually here's one with the expression chart. Look at that. That's Princess Luna doing a bunch of faces. I have a bunch of different shots of characters, heads at different angles, different things on coloring and perspective and anatomy. The one that helps me out a lot, though, that I probably use the most, is somebody made this image that I don't have the link to. Sorry, I probably should have looked for this earlier. But it has every character. Well, it has a whole bunch of characters you can see. I think this is this is up to date until like season 4 or 5. I don't know. I don't know. uh, Here's all the characters it's got. You probably can't read that on stream, but basically, I just find a character and I'm going to look for Mare because that's who we're coloring. And I kind of keep forgetting where she is. There she is. And this just has in like very simplified versions of the characters, so you can just grab the colors off of them. So like if I wanted Mare's line color, which I actually do. Uh, I can just grab it off of her, and I can grab her coat color and stuff off of it too. So let's get rid of these. We don't want that no more. So I guess the first trick I'm going to go over is coloring in lines. And there's a couple ways of doing this. If your image, well, your image, if your image is transparent, then it's very easy. You just preserve opacity, which means that things that are already opaque stay opaque, and things that are transparent or see-through stay transparent. So now that I've preserved the opacity, everything that's black is something I can now color, and the stuff that is white is stuff that I cannot color. So since I have all these black lines, I'm just coloring over them with her coat color. And I'll go back and do a more detailed job for like her hair and for the spa ponies and stuff in a second. But if you ever are doing an image where you want colored lines, uh, I would suggest just drawing them in black to make it easy for you, and then afterwards going through and coloring them all in whatever colors you want. You might prefer doing it a different way, and if you do and it's easiest on you, then by all means do that. This is just what's easiest on me. So we'll grab her main color, use that to color in her mane. Yeah. Oops. Oh, come on. There we go. That's pretty close to perfect at least. I missed a spot in black over here, but that's okay because it doesn't have to be the brown of Mayor Mayor's coat because that's a different character completely. And I'm just going to get things pretty close. I might kind of screw up in a couple little areas. But this is a demo. It's not something that well, I actually don't know if I'm going to publish this or not. And I'm going to publish a stream and everything. I don't know if I'm going to publish this image since I've already drawn it. I guess I will see what I feel like after the stream. And this works, or the colored lines thing looks especially nice with MLP characters because that's how the art in the show is. There aren't very many black lines in the show at all. All the characters are or their lines are all colored in. So everything looks a little bit more colorful than if their lines were black. Let's see. For her eyes, we're going to go ahead and make the eyelashes black. She's blushing over there, so we'll make that red. Let's see, what are her... When it comes to lining the eye, or to making the line color of the eyes, I usually just grab the darkest color of the eye and just apply that for the line. Yes, the stream is being recorded, so I'll be able to upload this to YouTube. I remembered to record it this time. Heck yeah. Last time I did this, I completely forgot to hit the record button. But I totally remembered this time. That's an interesting point, Manico. He says that you can give the lines a little bit more weight if they aren't primarily black, and then you can use black on the weights. Or you can lighten them up a little bit if they're in the light. So let's make this pillow pink. See, this is kind of the fun thing because I'm planning what the color is going to be, but since I haven't actually colored it in, I have to use a bit darker color than what I want the actual pillow to be. So if you're doing colored lines with a character that you don't have an easy color reference for, like these, then it might help you to just go ahead and color in the picture first, and then use those colors to help you color in the lines. It's just whatever helps you. Okay, and like Violet mentioned, you can do this with several layers. If I were to, instead of doing the preserve opacity trick, I could have just had the black lines and had a clipping layer on top of them, or well, a whole folder of clipping layers on top of them, and that would have given me a little bit more freedom to do some stuff if I needed to afterwards. But I guess I didn't think of it earlier, so now we're stuck with this. I'm going to go ahead and make a screenshot of this so I can actually go, whoops. Yeah, there we go. So now I can find the spa ponies and find their colors, which they're actually right here. I have absolutely no idea what paint.net has, Mr. Square, so I'm afraid I can't really help you with that. But a lot of painting program or a lot of drawing programs kind of have similar tools available to them. It's just they call them different things. But really, the only program I know is Sai, so it's what I'm phrasing all of my lessons as. Actually, let me see something. Is the pink of her lines for her hair the same as the pink? Yeah, okay. So that's fun. Uh, they are actually just palette swaps of each other. The blue, well, let's make sure, but that the same holds true for the blue. I would assume it does. Yeah. So the blue in her is the same as the blue in her, and the pink in her is the same as the pink in her. That's fun. I was actually going to talk some about Manic or Meisterly. I was going to talk a little bit about shading the lines, which I was going to do afterwards after I'd shaded the rest of the picture. Because for me, it's easiest to shade the bulk of things first and then go back and shade the lines afterwards. Uh, it's just a little bit easier for me to think of it that way. So we're making this one the blue one, and the one on top is going to be pink. I don't remember what I had it in the original picture, but the original picture does not matter. This is the original picture now. Oops, ears. Color those in. I don't often color in lines myself. I don't know why, I just don't. it ain't my style, I guess. Oops. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. Gotta remember what lines are what. I forget how old the original picture this is. This is a couple years old by now, I think. So some part, well, actually, for the most part, this holds up very well as a picture. Like, this is something I'm still proud of. Which is probably one of the reasons I chose it. Okay, and since I did her eyes, whoops, solidly in this picture, I'm just going to color grab a shot of her eyes here and replace all the black of the eye with that blue. So now her eyes are colored in again. That works, right? And these collars are going to be white. Let me make sure. Yeah. Uh, but one of the things I do is when I'm doing shaded images is I make sure nothing is ever just pure white. Because if I wanted to put something that's pure white, in a bright light source, it has no way of getting brighter than the pure white it already is. So I tend to like to make something that's supposed to be pure white like a very light blue. And that, okay, yeah. And that usually means that if it has to go into a light source or something, I can make it from that pure blue into a white. And kind of the same thing that happens, or kind of the same thing applies to things that are supposed to be pure black. As when I'm drawing, I never make something pure black. I always make it like a very dark blue or purple or something. Because if I need to shade that, I can go a bit darker than the black it already is. Okay. So let's say that this bottle is yellow. The cream is maybe, let's say the cream is kind of purpley pinky. It's one of those spa things that looks kind of gross, but is actually really good for you. So we have colors. We don't have colors for Miss Manager's booty mark. Uh, Cutie marks in the show are never lined. Well, I guess I can't really say that with certainty. I think most of them do not have lines associated with them. They're just kind of lineless images, little icons that go on their butt. Uh, so if I'm doing colored lines and I have to color in a cutie mark like that, I take the color, like the blue here, and I just make it darker. Whoops. So the ribbon on her butt is now going to be, the lines are going to be a darker blue, so I can use the true blue uh, to color the actual colors of the ribbon in. Oops. Yeah, this works. So it got a little bit messy there. And to make things a bit easy on me, I'm going to take the darkest part of the yellow here, make it a little bit darker, and then apply that to the entirety of the thing. And this doesn't look too much different from her coat color, but that's okay. Okay, so now we have a fully colored image. Woo! This is easy. Cutie marks never have black outlines ever. Yeah. Well, nothing in the show has a black outline except like very, very dark characters. Sombra might have had black outlines. Nightmare Moon might have had black outlines. Well, Nightmare Moon is just pure black, which makes drawing her a little bit weird. I tend to make her like a very, very dark blue. But, that's my own little rule for them. That's not something you have to follow at all. What was I going to do? Okay, so we've got colored outlines. I'm going to make... Oops. I'm just going to make like a layer with color on it. Let's make it green because there's not going to be any green anywhere. And so now, even if you aren't going to color your outlines, the next part is going to help, this is going to be like where you'd start actually coloring. So what I do is I take the line layer, or line layers, if you inked on multiple layers, which I do a lot. In that case, you have to put all the layers together in a folder. But I would take the line layer. Actually, we're going to just pretend this is a bunch of layers. So we'd put all the layers in a folder, and then make the folder what is called the selection source. And what the selection source does is it tells this magic wand tool over here what to work with. If there is no selection source, it'll just select everything. Well, actually, that's because of what I have it set to do. I have it set to work on a selection source. So if there is no selection source, it just works with everything. But now that I've given it a selection source, which is everything in this folder, it will know to select everything until it comes to a line. Excuse me. I think? Yeah. So what I do is I select everything outside the figure. And then I kind of check around for little gaps that the selection might have missed. Because it happens like here, there's a little area in her hair, or like right outside of her hair, that kind of comes to a very acute angle, and the selection did not get in all the way. So I take my select brush right here and kind of fill it in manually. And I just go around the form, making sure that the magic wand didn't miss anything else. Which it almost always misses something, so that's why this step is important. And this step only really works if you have clean and closed lines, which is why if I know I'm going to be making a full colored image, I make sure that the lines are clean and closed in, and that makes this part a lot easier. So I've gone around the form, I've looked, I've made sure that this magic wand didn't, I filled in what the magic wand did miss. And so now I have everything outside of these characters' lines. I have everything outside of these characters' lines selected. So then I go into selection and I invert it, which means that everything that wasn't selected now is, and everything that was selected is not. So where we had everything outside the characters selected, now we have everything inside the character selected. Meister Lee says that expanding the selection by 1 pixel sometimes is a good trick. And sometimes that does help catch things, but for me, sometimes it doesn't, especially because I have a tendency to make my lines kind of thin. So that kind of means that sometimes the selection actually moves inside the lines. So when I invert the selection, I don't have the entirety of the characters selected anymore. So that's not a thing I use very often. But if you draw with very thick lines, you'll have more room for error in that. So, that might be something good to keep in mind. Okay, so now that we have everything selected, I'm going to grab this brown because that's her coat color. That's going to be the color that most of this is going to be. I'm going to go down to a layer underneath the lines, and I'm just going to bucket tool everything. And now everything inside these lines is brown, is going to be a color. So what I do next is I take this layer and I preserve opacity. And just like what we did with the lines, that means that everything that has a color on this layer is going to always have a color, and everything that doesn't have a color, or everything that is transparent, is going to stay transparent. So if I wanted to go nuts and just color blue stuff, the only stuff that's actually being colored is the stuff that was already colored. But we want brown, so we're going to stay brown. I'm going to go ahead and, color pick the other colors. That's not what I wanted. Okay. And for this, I normally just I bucket tool stuff. Sometimes bucket tooling fails me, like here, and that's because I didn't draw the lines cleanly enough. But that's okay. I'll have to fix that manually. Oops. Coloring in her hair. I'm going to zoom in and just color this by hand. Oops. Sometimes it's easiest just to fix these things by hand rather than looking for where the line doesn't connect and trying to fix things there. If you can find where you messed up pretty easily, then that's probably the easiest fix, because then it means you can just fix the line and bucket tool the color real quick, and you don't lose any time that way. But sometimes, I've spent a long time hunting for where I screwed up in the line, and I can't find it, and it's just frustrating and it's a waste of time. So sometimes the best plan is not always or sometimes the easiest plan is not always the best. So now, we kind of left a couple areas brown because we bucket tooled, so we have to fix them by hand also. But basically, bucket tooling the entire character and then fixing the one or two mistakes that happen is just a lot quicker than coloring the entire thing with your normal brush by hand, which is why I'm doing it. That's the big advantage. And the quicker you can do things, the better in my book, because if you can finish something quickly, you can move on to doing something else. Okay, so we've got her eyes here. And in the show, eyes are pure white. And like I mentioned earlier, I don't like pure white, so I'm making her eyes a very light blue. And then I'm going to grab the colors off of this. select her eyes. And in the show, eyes have gradients. So, like, while it's depicted here as kind of an odd thing, it's kind of a smooth gradient. So I have this brush here, which is very good at blending things. And I just fill it all up with one color and then kind of blend things until I have a nice-ish looking gradient of the dark color to the light color. And sometimes it's not always going to be perfect, but that's okay. As long as it looks pretty nice. And I think that looks pretty nice, so I'm keeping it. The one exception I make to nothing pure white or pure black is the pupil of the eye. I guess I don't really have any reason for it. It's just the one exception I have. Because they're so close to being pure black in real life that it doesn't make much of a difference. At least not to me. So let's color in these horses. Excuse me. Block it. And the benefit of locking the layer like we did earlier, preserving the opacity, is that stuff on the outside of the form like this, I can, if I have to color it in manually, I can color it in without worrying about without going outside the colors that we need. So I don't have to make my strokes slower and more careful. I can just go nuts, or go a little more nuts at least. Yeah, let's go ahead and and one of the benefits of giving everything a color at the very beginning, like you did with making everything brown, uh, is for one, it's faster. Like when the majority of the colors are going to be one thing, but for another, it gives everything a color. So even if you kind of screw up in a tiny little corner of the map somewhere, or not map, wow, of the image somewhere, and you don't give it a color, uh, if you were going to shade that, it would be very obvious that you made a mistake because of the way I shade, which I'll go over in a little bit. Uh, it would have nothing to shade, so it would just be very obvious that there's a bright spot on your image, and that looks gross. But because we gave everything inside these lines the color brown, once we go to shade, uh, every part of the image will have a color to be shaded as. And I'll probably go over that a little bit more in detail when we talk about shading. Part of me kind of wishes I had chosen an easier image to do this with, but I didn't. And here we are, and now we all gotta look at Mayor's butt forever. How awful. Hmm. Sorry, I was reading chat. Um, Meisterly, I would say if you don't really know what you're doing with a lot of your brushes, uh, I'd say you just take time and get to know them. Uh, if you're using vanilla Psy, you don't really have a whole lot of options. But one of the benefits of Psy, as you can see by all my tools here, is that you can make your own brushes and they can all behave differently. So, like, yeah, let's go to this. Uh, we've got just a brush that kind of, it's a normal brush. It's kind of an inky brush. I've got a brush that kind of looks a little bit different. Here, this is one I want. This brush has a texture on it, so it kind of looks like a pencil drawing on really rough paper, and so that's a fun brush to sketch with. Here's another kind of inking brush that has a different shape to it, so that's fun for like rougher inks. We've got one that looks like a marker, kind of. It's fun for sketching also. We've got a bunch of painting brushes. This is the one I use most often now, because it can lay colors down very easily, but then it can also blend very easily with other colors, and so that just makes things really nice. And a lot of this is stuff that I just kind of had to. Well, a couple of these I made on my own, but a lot of these I went online and uh, either kind of downloaded, like from other people's copies of Psy, uh, or just kind of like people put up the settings of a brush that they like sometimes, and if I like the way that brush looks, I'll put it into my copy of Psy. I'll make a new brush, I'll copy their settings down, and then I'll use it and see if I like it. Uh, yeah, Mr. Square, I definitely recommend Psy a lot. Like, it's probably because I don't have much uh, experience in other programs, but this just has everything that I like. So it's, I don't know, it's very, very nice. It's a program I really, really love, and apparently Psy 2 is still kind of coming out, and it's not out yet, but I'm very looking forward to that, because it's going to have like perspective rulers and stuff in it, and I won't have to worry about that Carapace program anymore. But we don't need to worry about other brushes too much. Oops. Because right now we're just doing flat colors, and no big deal. Any brush will work. Well, I suppose yes, technically any brush will work for this, uh, but it's easiest with just a normal basic brush. There we go. So there we go. We've got flat colors, and we did it in a decent amount of time. I don't know exactly how long we spent on it, but if we had done everything by hand, we would have taken a lot longer. Uh, so like this is where the show stops, and that's all right and everything, but I don't want to stop here, so we're gonna keep on going. There we go. Give her a ground to be on. Uh, so shading for me, especially if we're just going to do cell shading, which that's all I'm. Eh, yeah, that's what we're going to talk about right now. We're going to talk about cell shading. Uh, is a matter of taking your flat color layer, making a layer on top of it, clipping it down to the base color layer, and what that does is it does the same thing as preserve opacity does, only where preserve opacity works off of the one layer. Uh, a clipping group clips a layer to another layer. So with this, I can color on this new layer, and all that it will affect is the stuff that's on the layer below it, because I have it clipped. If I unclip it, you can see I've actually made a lot of marks, but if I clip it again, you can see it only applies to the layer below it. So let's get rid of that. Psi has a bunch of different layer modes, which I'll talk about. The one we want for shading purposes is going to be multiply, where that does, well, here. This is what normal. If we've got blue, if we've got a purple here, and I do a normal layer, then it just colors normal purple. I can reduce the opacity a little bit, or a lot, and you can kind of see what that happens. It's basically how much of that layer shows up. If I do multiply, though, it takes the color and makes it darker, and makes it so that, like, here. So this is probably the best way of saying it. Like, the purple here, on a normal layer it's just purple. If I multiply it, you can see it takes everything on the layer below it and makes it darker. So the blue is now darker, the brown of her butt is darker, the pink of this other pony is darker. And we can, just like with normal layer, we can reduce the opacity and make it less dark. When we're shading, this is what we're going to want. If we're going to add highlights later, let's go ahead and take that off for a second. Make another clipping group. Let's just do screening for now. If we wanted to make highlights, we would use either a screening layer, which makes things more white, it feels like, or we could use a luminosity layer, which makes things very, very bright. And I tend to like to work in luminosity because luminosity adds more of the color that you're working with, where screening layers tend to make things look just white and kind of washes out the colors. And there's definitely a use for that, but for the most part, I prefer using luminosity for lighter things. Shade, let's go ahead and look at this. Shade kind of does the same thing as multiply does, but it does it slightly differently. I'm still not entirely sure on the logic behind it, but they're kind of two different ways of accomplishing the same thing. I tend to like multiply layers for shade, or for shading things, and actual shade layers if I just want to make something really dark. Binary color is a very odd thing. I do not understand why you would ever use this. I don't understand the purpose of it. It's just kind of weird and gross looking. So I don't think it really has a use. Lumi and shade is very cool. It kind of helps make colors more vibrant. Like, I don't really understand the logic behind it either. But when I want to change the mood of a piece, I will use a Lumi shade layer on top of things, and I'll go over that in a little bit. But for just shading, nope, multiply. Let's get rid of this, actually. Shading is basically a matter of finding out where the light source is, and for now, we're going to put it coming from behind her and kind of to the top left. So we're going to say this is where the light is coming from. So shading is a matter of finding out where your light source is, where the light is going to hit, and where the light is not going to hit. And so to shade, we're going to take a look at this. We've got our light source up here, and we're going to say, okay, so the light's not going to hit kind of all the way over here. And we're just going to make all this part darker on our multiply layer. So shading, more than anything else, is where understanding the 3D shapes of an object really comes in handy. Because her butt is not just this flat circle, it's kind of like, well, it's round, like butts should be. So you have to know that and use that to kind of determine where lighting is going to be, or where the shading is going to be. I think that part might be hit by the light. The important part is to kind of keep things as consistent as you can. Oops. Don't just, one thing I've seen people do is just like, well, the light's over here, so basically everything on the left side is going to be light, and everything on the right side is going to be dark, and that's not exactly correct. Uh, you have to. I mean, that's what would happen if the character was literally two-dimensional, but if you're shading things, you have to think of the character as a three-dimensional object, not well, you have to think of the character as a series of three-dimensional objects, not as a two-dimensional one. And things are going to look a little bit weird for a while. Uh, this is very appropriate music right now, because I'm trying to work out the puzzle of what should and should not be shaded. Oh no, you can't hear the music. That's probably for the best, honestly. Uh, means I can upload this without having to worry about like people wanting to take it down. We're listening to Professor Layton though. Whoops. Because it's a good soundtrack. It's mostly nice, quiet music. Good for working. Don't have to worry about like any really crazy music coming along and like ripping out your concentration or anything. Oops. Okay, so check it out. Her butt looks like a butt. It looks like, you know, there's a light part of it, and the parts that are supposed to be in shadow are actually in shadow. Uh, and these are all because of, we're thinking of things as actual shapes, and we're figuring out where the light is supposed to go, where the shadow is supposed to go. Those are called form shadows. Uh, the other kind of shadow you need to know of is called cast shadows, and that is uh, where something actually gets in the way of the light. Like when you're looking at your shadow on the ground, that is a cast shadow. That is your body getting in the way of the light and casting a shadow on something else. So because of where we've placed our light source up here, I am sorry, uh, where we've placed the other pony here, uh, she is in the way of the light, and so she's going to be casting a shadow on Miss Mayer here. And actually, yeah, so we're just going to go ahead and take care of that. I am trying not to die. Uh, So actually this is going to be a little bit difficult. Let's let's figure out how this works together. What I'm doing here is selecting the areas of Miss Mayor here so that I will be coloring on her and I won't have to worry about coloring on the spa pony. And I will show you that in just a second. So we've got all of this selected here. If I go back to my pen, you can see I'm stroking right through her and not actually coloring her because we don't have her selected. So I can kind of just worry about coloring without worrying about coloring her in. And cast shadows really help, really help a piece, but they can be kind of hard to figure out, especially like right now we've got we've got the curvature of her butt to keep in mind. Well, actually, it'd be more like this, I guess. Yeah, like if we were going to plot out her thing as a 3D shape, it would look kind of like this. So you know, her shadows are going to fall pretty far down here. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge. It's nothing I've ever paid too much attention to, I guess. It's something I need to. Like, the actual shape of the thing casting the shadow is something I probably should pay more attention to, but I kind of just, like, uh, do a thing until it looks okay. And that's not ideal at all, but that looks decent. So we're going to keep that. But now we actually have to shade her, and that's going to be interesting. She's got her back turned to the light source. So basically, most of her front is going to be, is going to be in shadow, and most of her backside is going to be lit up. But really, shading is going to be just a combination of form shadows and cast shadows, and at this point I've gotten kind of decent at being able to tell what's supposed to go where. I still have mistakes. I still have a lot of mistakes, my word. I would never say that I'm very good at shading, especially to some of the people uh, I kind of idolize, I guess. Idolize might be a bad word for it, but there are people I really look up to who just like know how coloring works and how light is supposed to affect things, and that's not really an area I'm at yet. At least not on their level, and that's something I'd like to do. Or that's a place I'd like to be, is at their level. So it's something I'm working at. It's just not something I'd say I'm terribly satisfied with where I am yet. But I will get there. It's just going to take me a while. Yeah, see, that's kind of the thing. Mr. Squares, says you feel the same way about me. Like I am somebody you look up to in this area. And that's kind of always going to be how it is. Uh, like, just because I say I don't color things very well doesn't mean that you have to agree with that. Uh, like, there's always going to be people that are better at you at some things and people that are going to be worse. And, uh, I don't know, everybody's going to have different standards depending on where they are in certain things. And I guess that's one thing that took me a long time to realize. This isn't necessarily art advice or anything. This is just me talking right now. Uh, but it took me a while to kind of understand the subjectivity of being good and bad, I guess. Is that, just because I'm not great at something right now doesn't mean that I'm the worst at it. You know, and just because I'm really bad at, well, I don't know, how am I trying to say this? Uh, hmm, I don't know, I got distracted. I'm trying to say this in a way that doesn't sound awful. But, like, I'm pretty good at coloring, and I have to realize that I have a strength there, even if it's not a strength that's as strong as I want it to be yet. Uh, it is something that I have a bit of skill at, and I need to realize that just because I'm not where I want to be in this area yet, it doesn't mean that I'm garbage at it. Like the fact that I'm doing all right now, kind of understanding where the forms are and what the shapes are, that is amazing compared to uh, what I was able to do like a year ago. In fact, I kind of wish I'd kept the other thing around. Uh, but I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is just because I have my own idols uh, in the area of coloring doesn't mean that I should disparage it when somebody else finds my skill as something to look up to. Uh, yeah, just because I'm not the best at it, just because I'm not where I want to be, doesn't mean that somebody else can't look up to me. Yeah, I should be saying inexperienced instead of bad. But I guess, yeah, because I'm sure like the people that I whose coloring styles I really like and who I look up to in that area probably have their own people they look up to because there's somebody out there that just does something so much better than them. They're just like, wow, that's what I want to do. And that doesn't mean that they're bad at coloring at all, just like it doesn't mean I'm bad at coloring at all. It just means that I don't know what I'm saying anymore. It just means that there's always going to be somebody better than you at this, and just because that's the fact of the matter, uh, doesn't mean that you're bad. It doesn't. It does mean you're inexperienced, or it could mean you're inexperienced. You might have a lot of experience with doing something and still be doing something kind of poorly. And that's what. Well, I don't know. I'm getting off on like several tangents and not really saying what I intended to say. So I guess like ignore the last 5 minutes of me talking. Okay, so this lady down here is going to be an interesting thing because of where the light is. Uh, that's not quite correct. Let's fix this. Yeah, that's better. Because of where the light source is, a lot of her is going to just be shadowed by the hoof. So we can just kind of do that, and then I'm going to clean it up in a second, and uh, that's her shaded. And keep in mind, this is all just cell shading, uh, where we're just taking a light source and finding out what a dark area is going to be because of that light source. Real light, or this, we'll say it this way, this is a very, very, very simplified way of how light works. Uh, Whoops, there we go. What? Come on. There we go. Uh, in reality, light works a lot differently. Like there's reflections to consider, and excuse me. And like even though you're not dealing with like a particularly reflective surface like glass or metal or something, light can still bounce off of things and influence the color of things that are close to it. And that's kind of the biggest area I have problem with when coloring, is figuring out how that kind of thing works. And then I look at some other artists and they can just like they make things look really real because they know how reflections can work. And that's one of my major goals is to figure out how all that's going to work. It's not something I'm very good at yet. It is something that I'm attempting to figure out and be better at. But right now, it's one of the areas that I really want. I really need more improvement in, and that's okay. There's nothing. Well, there's nothing wrong with knowing where you need improvement. It's actually a very good thing to be able to look at your art and realize this is an area I'm kind of weak in right now, and then to be able to figure out what steps you need to take to make your weakness into a strength. Goodness. Yeah. I think this is how it works. Let's. Uh, yeah, let's go ahead and take this. Oops. Come on now. There we go. So you can see we've got a good deal of everything colored right now. We've just got like her head to go and the pillow. So we're gonna keep working at it. And you can see everything kind of looks. Actually, let's go ahead and save this while we can. Uh, because I don't want to lose all that work. And I've had plenty of experience with losing work recently. But you can see it kind of makes sense, like what areas are dark and what areas are light. Things kind of follow a logic, and that's what I'm aiming for, and that's what I've got. So this is a good thing. Oops. Please select the right tool. Thank you. So because of where the light source is, it's all the way over here. it'll be shining kind of on the back of her head, so a lot of her head is actually going to be in shadow. It's going to be something like this. And the shape of her ears is going to mean that light's going to, or shadow's going to fall on part of it. And then the ear is actually going to cast a shadow. So ears are kind of tricky when it comes to shading for me. I think it's going to be something like this. Whoops. And then the inside of the ear is not going to get any light. Not at this angle, at least. So we're just going to color it all in. Her eye is going to be dark because of where the light is. Most of her hoof, whoops. Oh, come on now. There we go. No. There we go. That looks better. We're just going to say all of this is dark. Let's do it like this, I guess. And her hair is just kind of a series of poofs, so that makes shading it easy once you understand that. Let's actually go ahead and do this. Oops. Okay. So now we've got colors, and we've got shading, and this all looks a bit, well, actually, I was going to say the shading looks too dark, and I'm going to, we're going to color in the lines first, and then we're going to see if we still feel that way. So this is the inking layer. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing we did with the coloring layer. We're going to make a layer above it, make it a clipping group, and make it a multiply layer at about 60%. So now, since we have colored lines and we have a shading layer on top of it, it's going to work just like the coloring does, or the actual colors. We can just color in the lines at the parts where no light is reaching, and hopefully this will result in everything looking a little bit more sensible. Because having those bright lines, or the uniformly bright lines with actual shading on them, kind of throws me off. It looks very bad and just, I don't know. If you're going to be shading something that has colored lines, this is a step you really need to take, because otherwise you end up with the bright lines everywhere and it does not look correct. So I guess that's why if I'm going to do colored lines, I usually do it on like flat colored pieces, so that I don't have to worry about shading in the lines. Luckily this girl is all dark, So shading in her lines is going to be pretty easy. So see already, with the lines that we've shaded, they look like they belong here now. Yeah, like Meister Lee says, if you don't do it this way, she has a very odd glow to her, and it doesn't look like she is supposed to be here. It doesn't look like she actually exists, and that's one of the big benefits of shading is it makes a character look like they actually exist in an environment, like they're actually somewhere, and they're not just a little doodle. Oops. I'm kind of being a little bit messy with this, which is not good. Uh, but it's what's happening. Whoops, that's a mistake. Here's something I messed up earlier. I did not actually. I actually messed several things up. I did not shade her collar, and I kind of messed up shading elsewhere. So yeah, there we go. Now everything looks a little bit better. Okay. Here's an interesting thing. You can see, let's zoom in on it just in case it doesn't show up too well on the stream. You can see at this very tip of her hoof here, it looks like we didn't actually get that colored. So this is what I was talking about earlier. Excuse me again. Uh, what I was talking about, you really want to have the entire thing flat colored well. So when shading happens, you don't get little areas like this. Actually, let me make sure. Whoops. Actually, never mind. I'm full of crap. I just didn't shade it right. But actually, uh, let's go ahead and screw it up to prove a point. Whoops. So, like, say we were flat coloring this normally, and I had left this area blank. You know, in the grand scheme of things, when you just look at it, you can't notice very well, even at like 100% zoom. It's not all that noticeable. But once you throw the shading on, all of a sudden you have a bright spot on her hoof, and it looks like something you definitely need to fix. So that's why we do the flat coloring method the way we do is so that we don't have to worry about having those little areas. Yeah, I messed up by not messing up. But that's why we do it, so we don't have to worry about having these little areas that we have to go back and fix the flat colors on. That's just not fun. So we were working on the lines. Let's see. Yeah, we'll color those in. Oh, I know what happened here. I didn't quite color in this line correctly. That's why it looked so odd. Interesting. There's one other spot I was having trouble with too. Where was it? Crap. Now it's going to haunt my memories. Or not, because I'm deciding not to care. Go back to this. Oh, and okay. I lost my color. So if you ever, like, accidentally lose your shading color, one thing you probably should be doing is, like, you can make a layer that's not going to be anywhere and just kind of have, like, shading color and, lighting colors and stuff. Stuff that's not going to be, like, true colors that show up. You just have them somewhere on the canvas so you can go back and color pick them. But if you don't do something like that, and you're an idiot like me, you can go on your shading layer and where it was multiply at like 60%. If you tried to color grab that, you would end up with the color that it actually is, this weird dark brown. And once you tried to shade with that, whoops, you'd realize you had the wrong color. Uh, but if you don't, we'll do that on this layer to make it more visible. If you don't do something like that, you can always take it from a multiply layer at whatever percent to a normal layer at 100%, and you can color grab that very easily, and then go back to a multiply at 60, whatever. Which is something I've had to do a lot because I am not very smart. And I get rid of things that I need pretty often. But this is a teaching stream, so I want you to learn from my mistakes. Because, oh boy, do I make mistakes. And if part of my teaching can be like helping people to not make those mistakes, hey, that works. There's a lot of things I do when I draw that are not very optimal. And that's because I guess I started drawing as a traditional artist. And when I say that, I mean like I just doodled in class and stuff, and things kind of grew on from there. But I still have a lot of habits that are kind of hard to break from my traditional art career, I guess. And a lot of, like, I like to work on as few layers as possible. Because when I worked as a traditional artist, I had no layers. I just had the sheet of paper I was on. And, excuse me. So when I'm working digitally, I still, that's kind of a holdover, I guess, from my attitude, is I like to have as few layers going as possible. It's what's most comfortable to me. I know people who work and have like hundreds of layers going on for a single image. And uh, like for me, a lot of layers is like 20 or 30. But they're like, yeah, I use like, 60 layers just inking a thing. And I'm like, how do you survive? But like this, admittedly, we just have one layer for the inks and we don't have any sketch or anything. But we're only at 7 layers. We've got uh, inking layer, we've got the background layer, we've got the flat color layer, we've got the shading layer, we've got this layer that's not going to be used for anything, which is where we had the light source and the little color splotches at the top. And then we've got the layer for the shading, the shading of the lines. 4 layers is not that much, Mr. Square. Uh, it might be for you because you focus mainly on just coloring things. You don't worry about, actually having to draw things. Uh, and I'm still not entirely sure what your process is, even though you've explained it to me. I'm just not grasping it. But that's okay. Whatever works for you works for you. And this is what works for me. We were also going to talk about highlights. So we're going to turn this on, get rid of it. Highlights, in contrast to shading is where the light in a picture does not hit. The highlights are the places where the light hits the most. And certain materials like hair and like glass is shiny and metals are shiny and rubber is shiny. Certain materials reflect light better, so they're going to be a lot. This is where the highlights help. Like skin, for the most part, unless it's like oily or wet or something, isn't terribly reflective or shiny. So when I'm coloring things, for the most part, there's always going to be exceptions to the rules. But for the most part, I don't put like luminosity layers on skin or on like pony coats or on fur. Usually it's just not something that looks too good. Except unless if I'm in, well, like I said, there's always exceptions. But for the hair here, let's turn that up. So let's turn that back down. Hair, you kind of just put squiggles in places where you think the light's going to hit. Eyes are normally very shiny, but like hers are actually everybody's eyes in this are kind of in the shadow. Like you can put little eye shines in places. I probably should have chosen a better color for this, but we're working with yellow, so that's what we've got. Kind of put squiggles where you think the light's going to hit the most for hair, because hair, especially like ponytails and hair are made of hairs, and it's a bunch of individual hairs making up like a block of color. And like with this, I kind of just treated it as I treated her hair as an object where in a lot of pictures, something I'm learning to do is treat hair as many objects, as a bunch of hairs. So, like, actually, for this, if I'm going to illustrate what I was talking about, instead of just having a curve to indicate the poof, I would actually do. I would do something a bit different. I would do something like this to kind of show that she has a bunch of hair, and that what might be hitting some parts of the hairs, the group of hairs, would be making a little bit different shape. And I can even do something like this to show that there are parts of those hairs that are still not being hit by the light. This might not be the greatest example. But, that's what I would do if I was doing hair a bit differently. We're going to keep it poof for now, because I said so. We're actually going to change the poof, though, because this looks kind of bad, and it's been bothering me. Okay, come on. Do what I told you. But back to the highlights. Because hair is made of a bunch of different things, that's why we do, excuse me, the kind of squiggle shape. We make it look like the light is hitting different hairs individually. And it's just something that kind of looks nice. We've already done her up. So if we take this away, actually we're going to, it still looks like the lighting on this is really harsh, like the shading is really, really dark. So I'm just going to take the layer we've already made, and instead of like reworking anything, I'm just going to lower the opacity on it. And so now it just looks like she's in kind of, normal shadows. We're actually going to do the same to this. So everything looks a lot more natural, looks a lot better. I was going to talk about one other thing, I think, in regards to lighting. What was it? Oh yeah, okay. Let's go to this. Let's draw something really simple. Let's draw another Mayor because she tends to be the character I use for these kind of things. I'm just going to draw this from scratch. It's going to be quick and not look all that great, but that's okay. We're not going to give her glasses because we're rebels like that. Can I do this? We're not giving her glasses because that kind of complicates matters. So we've got a rough sketch. So let's put all this into a thing. I'm going to kind of clean up the sketch a little bit to make it easier to work with. And the cool thing about taking sketches to line art, which this kind of is, like this, is that your sketch doesn't have to be perfect. You're using your sketch as a base to form the lines around. So if you don't follow your sketch perfectly, that's alright. It's not something you have to stress out over. Like, in my sketch, I didn't have the little eyebrow thing, I didn't have the cheek, I didn't have any eye detail. But now I do. In these quote-unquote lines. I'm not even really following the hair shape I gave her. I'm kind of just going for it. Which is something that kind of defines me as an artist, honestly. I just go for things. Sometimes things look good and it was worth just doing whatever, and sometimes things look pretty bad and I lament the fact that I don't have very much discipline when it comes to things. But hey, here we go. We have kind of lines. Let's clean up things a little bit. Actually, we're going to kind of vary the line weight up a little bit. Because I've already kind of planned out, like in my head, I already know where I want the light source to be, which is why in the lines I gave her the eye shines here. I know I'm going to have the light coming from this direction, so the eye shines are going to be here because that's the part of her eyes that are going to receive the most light. So right now I'm making certain lines darker, and these are going to be the lines next to the areas that aren't going to receive as much light. They're going to be in shadow. So now the intent at least is that even in the inking you can kind of get a small sense of light and shadow. It might not be perfect. In fact, it's probably not, because this is not something I do as often as I should. But even if it's not perfect from a logic sense, it still kind of looks nice to have lines, like thick lines and thin lines. It's just a little bit more pleasing to look at if everything isn't just the same width. So there we go, we got lines. And actually these look pretty good. For me, having just kind of like done things really quickly, I'm pretty happy with these. These look nice. We're going to get rid of this because we don't need it anymore. We're just going to look at Mayor. Basically what I wanted to talk about here is painting, for lack of a better word. Let's do it like this. So we have a color that's not white to look at. Let's use that brush I really like. And painting is kind of just a way of it's doing colors manually. And like I said earlier, that was something I kind of did a lot when I started out, because, well, when I was coloring traditionally, it was all I had. I had one piece of paper, and, the colors I put on it, I couldn't say, okay, well, I want this darker, so I'm going to slap a multiply layer on this. I just had my sheet of paper, and I had to work with what I had. So when I started out digitally, I kind of kept that habit, I guess, kept that mindset of kind of liking to do things on one layer, just kind of making colors. And it's not a bad choice. It's something I like doing, and I like the finished look of. And so that's fine. It's not something I use very often in work, or in things that are supposed to be for anybody else but me, really, because it's a lot easier for me to make something that doesn't look very good, I suppose. And with something like this, it's easy for me to it's easy and it's quick, and that's good. And even on like the more intricate lighting things I've done, excuse me, I use a bunch of layers because it's easier and it's quicker than just doing like a one layer painting thing. just kind of what I'd rather do sometimes. But uh, heated manual coloring here. Yeah, you raise a good point. Like with quick and dirty sketches, coloring like this can look very nice. It looks just sketchy and fun, and you don't have to, you know, things don't always have to be clean. That's one of the benefits of digital art is that you can make things look nice and clean, but sometimes you want things to look a little bit dirty and, rough. So I'm going to kind of paint her hair. I'm not going to color everything all at once. We're going to pick the color we need. We're going to kind of shift it more towards blue. Well, we're going to make it darker, bring it to the right to add a little bit more color. Then we're going to shift it some towards blue. And we do that because yellow light, which like natural light from the sun is yellow, and a lot of indoor lights like from lamps and ceiling fans and stuff like that is going to be yellow. Yellow light casts blue shadows. Basically, you look at the color wheel and you look at the area opposite from it. Like if your light is yellow, you're going to want something from blue to purple. If your light is red, you're probably going to want to cast shadows somewhere over here. And if somehow you're dealing with green light, you're going to want something around here. There is room for you to play a little bit. You don't have to just go straight across, but you want to go pretty close to across. And that's like if you're going to choose things for like a multiply layer, that's what I would say. But since we're painting, we're going to take the color of her hair, make it darker and a little bit more saturated, and we're just going to bring it a little bit to the shadow color. We're not going to take it all the way there. And then we're just going to start painting in the areas we think are going to be darker. And kind of one of the benefits of this brush is this is the brush I showed you earlier that can lay down color well and blend it. So, so I can blend whatever colors I'm laying down easier and things look really nice. This is definitely a lot different from just the cell shaded look we had in the other picture, but I'd say this is not right or wrong. This is just a different way of doing it. Let's go ahead and do her neck. We've got this color for her normal coat color. So since it's here and we want to bring the color a bit to blue a little bit, we're going to make it a little bit more red and then kind of bring it down and to the right some. And then we're just going to start coloring. And you can see I'm being a little bit messy, like with letting my shading get up in here when I'm not working there yet. But that's because I am going to fix it later. It's a lot easier to just kind of be a little bit messy and then fix it later, especially if you're working from kind of back to front. Like if you think about this as a 3D character, the hair in here is the furthest thing back. Then you've got her neck, then you've got her head, and you've got the collar here, and then you've got the hair up on the top of her head, and then you've got her ear at the very, very front. So when you're painting, you kind of work from the back of the image to the front of the image because it just makes a little bit more sense that way. probably shouldn't be doing that quite yet. Let's go ahead and color in the collar. This is where I'm going to change the canvas color, I guess. Wow, that's pretty bad. That works though. Oops, there we go. We're going to say that her collar is casting a little bit of a shadow on this part of her neck. And then we're going to take this and do this. Oops. And actually, when we're doing stuff like this, when I'm doing paintings, like I said, when you're shading, you bring things more towards the dark color, the blue, which would be the shading. But if you're going to do highlights, if you're going to put things in the light, you move it closer towards the light color, move things up and over to the left some. And so we're going to make her neck here look a little bit brighter. And now things look just a little bit more, they pop a little bit better, I think. There's her collar. Let's see, her mouth color is going to be like that, I guess. We're going to give it a bit of a gradient so it looks like it's getting darker the farther into the mouth it goes. And we're still being kind of messy, but that's okay. That's something we're going to clean here in just a little bit. Let's give her a tongue. Now, tongues are usually wet, which means they're going to be a little bit more shiny than other parts. So I'm going to, well, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and shade the parts that look like they need to be shaded, which is basically just the parts that are closer to the back of the mouth. But then I'm going to give her highlights, and the highlights are going to be very close to white because it's the tongue is very shiny. It's going to look basically like that, I think. That might not look perfect. That's something I still have to work on. But this is the kind of thing that, like, I don't teach very often, I guess, because it's not something a lot of people are going to want to do in digital art, and that's fine. Like, I totally get it. Like, the appeal of digital art is that, well, I guess the appeal is that you can do whatever you want, and a lot of people kind of want to make things that look cool and clean and crisp, and the the painting that I'm doing right now is definitely not cool or clean or crisp. Wow, cool or clean or crisp. Words failed me for a second. Like they do sometimes. And actually, Mr. Square, about your assertion for that, like, 40 layers is usually like my upper limit for a picture total, not just for the colors on it. That includes sketches and line art and all kinds of other things. And that's usually with stuff like the Tina picture, which I actually, let's drag that out real quick, because that's actually probably a really good whoops, a really good example of what I'm talking about with like really crazy lighting. So let's see, how many layers does this have? 18. Wow, this looks like it only has 20 layers. Uh, but there's a lot of stuff going on with the coloring here. And like, if we just did flat colors, that looks kind of boring. I mean, it looks fine, I guess, actually. And if we just added normal shading and luminosity stuff on it, or well, just normal shading, I guess, because luminosity is part of the atmospheric lighting. But if we just worked on that, let's see, that'd be, oh, whoops, before 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 layers, which means I have 10 layers purely devoted to making this image look crazy. Which, honestly, I'm really proud of this image. Like, there's a lot of lighting stuff going on that I didn't know I could really do. But, like, this is probably an example of a lot of layers for me, and it's about 20. Now let's make her go away so we can finish this. And then you have people like Sugary Violet who do a single background and put 89 layers into the one background. And then they look great, and that's fine. That's just, if that's the way you work, then do it. That is definitely not something I'd ever be able to do. I just would not have the patience. I want things nice and organized and in as few boxes as possible. But that's kind of the cool thing about art, is that people can go about things completely differently and still get really cool results. And I mean, while there are definitely wrong ways to go about things, uh, I'd say uh, the wrong way of doing things, there are very, very few wrong ways. There's a lot of right ways of doing things and just a lot of different things, and that's fine. That's what art is, yo. If it helps you to do 200 layers just for the inking, then do frickin' 200 layers for the inking. Just go for it. For me, it helps and is most fun to just have as few things going on as possible, and so that's how I try to work. Kind of one of the benefits of painting like this is that, like I said earlier, since the hair is not just a block of color, it's a bunch of little hairs in a group. Uh, so painting something like this is fun because it's a lot easier to kind of indicate individual hairs. And it's something that you can do and make it look nice, and I don't know. Sometimes that can be hard to do when you're just cell shading. Oops. Oh, hey, one thing about digital shading, if you want to cheat by doing the whole magic wand tool to make sure you're only coloring in the parts you want to, you can totally do that. I don't know if that's something that's frowned upon by people or whatever, but whoa, what did I do? Okay, I somehow got rid of everything. That was frightening. Thank you, Control Z, for existing. And whoops, I just realized what I'm doing. And of course, if you don't want to indicate all the hairs, you don't have to. Definitely not. It's just something that you can do if you want to do, and I do want to do it, so I am doing it. Amazing how that works out. Um, and here we're going to do the highlights. And highlights for hair are always, well, not always, but they are usually very close to being pure white. And that's fine. I mean, of course it's fine. I don't know why it wouldn't be. But it's just something you can do. And also, if you want to keep indicating hairs like this, you can just do very kind of low brush strokes. Kind of like this to kind of show lighter areas of the hair. And actually, now that I've done this, I might try to do that a little bit more with the darker areas. Do something like this to kind of show. Ooh, yeah, actually, this looks nice. See, so this definitely doesn't look perfect by any means, but it definitely looks a lot more like actual hair than this does, which this just looks like kind of a blob. And that's okay for things to look kind of like a blob, but that's not what I wanted for this. I'm going to go ahead and probably should have done this earlier. I'm going to add the highlights for her face. Now I know about where the light's supposed to hit. So I'm kind of making parts of her face a little bit brighter to show that. And one thing I'm going to try that sometimes doesn't work is, because the snout is shaped like a box, let's... wow, I was going to use that. Here we go, we'll do this. The snout is kind of shaped like a box, so you have this, then you have kind of this kind of box sticking out of it. And that's the snout. So if your light is coming from over here, this side of the snout of the box is going to be in shadow. And this is a very basic way of representing it, but that's kind of how the snout's supposed to work. And so what I am still learning how to do is how to shade that side of the snout gracefully. And sometimes I can get it to look nice, and sometimes it just looks weird, and I just forget it. Whoops, that's interesting. I obviously did not have very good lines. Wow. Where's it escaping from? Well, maybe it's not. Okay. Whatever. We'll just do it normally. So something like this is kind of what makes sense to me. But I don't know if that's entirely correct or not. And so sometimes I just leave it out because I don't know how to do it correctly. Which is honestly a lot of things regarding shading. I kind of bragged earlier about kind of having acquired a feel for the shapes that a character or that a figure has, and being able to uh, put them together in a way that makes sense. But that is not entirely true when it comes to coloring. Sometimes I don't get things, and that's gotten me in trouble. But that's okay. That's something I'm learning, and it's something I'll figure out. But right now, it's just it's something to work on. That doesn't quite make sense. So hey, we're getting there. Had a bit of cast shadow here because of her hair. Let's work on her eyes. Oops. Again, I'm making the eyes blue because the parts that need to be highlighted are going to be white, And I know there are parts that are going to be highlighted, so going ahead and making these parts blue is what makes sense. And one thing to kind of note, I guess, is that just because like this part of the eye is in shadow here, it doesn't mean it's really dark, because it is still an eyeball. It's going to be, pretty bright in almost all circumstances. It's just going to be less bright than uh, than the part that's in shadow, or not in shadow, than the part that isn't in shadow. Let's go ahead and figure out her eye colors. We can go ahead and make the eye shine over here white. Make this white. I'm actually going to make this part very, very dark blue, because that's what I feel like, and it's going to look alright. Actually make it darker. There we go. It's a horse. I guess I don't know how relevant the painting part is to any of you guys. I probably shouldn't have spent so much time on it, but it's something I like doing, and it was something, so, yay. I don't know if anybody has any, if anybody's still paying attention, or if anybody still has any questions that they'd like to ask, or if I should just cut the stream off here, because we've been going for how long now? Almost 3 hours. Oh, nice. Nice, Manico. I guess if nobody has any questions, I'll just go ahead and cut it off here. I hope some of you guys learned something, and I hope all you guys at least kind of enjoyed yourselves while you were here. But yeah, everybody go home. See you guys later.